I also want to point out as kind of like a data integrity hack that they send out these courtesy notices. So this is especially important when you have a listing on the market, that data integrity sends you these email reminders 10 days out from your closing date and 2 days out from your closing date. That way, if information changed in real life, like maybe the price changed, if the closing date, is coming around and it got extended because that's just life and always happens, you're reminded to go in and update it in the system. Now, I want to go over some common violations. These are common violations from experienced folks and new folks all across the board, just some important ones we want to touch on when you're adding a listing. Incorrect sales price. I think that's a no-brainer. You can't have differing price in the MLS versus what the tax records show that it actually sold for. This is a $500 violation. So it's just a good rule of thumb, just to make sure that you enter the correct information in your listing when you're changing it to pending. When you're changing your listing to pending or under contract, if you're using that UCB status, it asks for all of the closing information. It'll ask you for the price and the selling agent and the closing date, all that secret information you don't want anyone to see yet. But that information doesn't show until it does actually close. So you want to put in all the accurate information in there once you're changing it to pending. And then that way you don't have to worry about anything moving forward after that. It's just everything's automatic from there. And then also just never be afraid of telling yourself, if you do catch yourself incorrectly putting in the wrong price, maybe you forgot a zero at the end, or you put in one too many zeros. I've definitely seen that. Tell on yourself and you'll never receive a violation for it. Now, contact information in the media is definitely a big one. So you want to make sure that contact information, including your name, the brokerage's name, a logo, a photo, an email address, none of that is allowed. Nothing can relate back to an agent or a brokerage. So a tip to avoid this is, the biggest one is that for sale sign in the yard. It doesn't necessarily have to be removed, but you can blur it from the photo. And I know that nowadays there are so many pieces of technology that will blur just a little part of an image for you. So it's typically pretty easy to just obscure that little part of the image. There's even a blog post on that topic. But that's definitely a big one. Just make sure you have no contact information in the media. This, I love to just kind of relate it to, just avoiding confusion on who buyers should be reaching out to when they are, working with an agent. Incorrect listing status. Again, I think this is a no-brainer for you guys. Everything has to be accurate and factual in the MLS no matter what. So you do want to make sure you update it throughout its timeline if something does happen to change with it. Tip to avoid this one, I think the best is to just keep an eye out for those courtesy notices. Data integrity does send you an email reminder 10 days out and 2 days out that just says, hey, your listing is about to close. Here are all the details. Hey, if the details are good, you don't have to do anything. But if you do need to change it, that's your reminder to go ahead and update it in the system. Now, the next common violation, inappropriate language. This, not curse words, profanity. This is everything in its place. And there are certain things that can and cannot be said in the MLS. So a couple of examples here is you're not allowed to require the use of a specific title company. I love that last one of no pets allowed, including service animals, because, well, that one's discriminatory. So, you can't place it in the listing. It's inappropriate to have it. And then inappropriate language, those are $200 violations. A tip to avoid this one is don't be afraid to call data integrity. I do recommend for the public remarks to try to stick to details about the property itself. Not really going into details about the terms of the sale or the transaction that can, kind of get sticky within the public remarks. But if you're ever unsure, contact data integrity. We even have this great form, if you go to ARMLS.com, where you can submit your entire paragraph that you want to put in the public remarks, and they'll tell you if you can or cannot place it in there. Maybe they'll say, well, this is almost okay, but maybe you have to change one word, or maybe you should place that in the private remarks instead. So again, we're here to just help you, not hurt you. Now, the last one that I have, the conditional commission comments. You just have to know that commission amounts cannot be based on any certain conditions that you might have for the sale. So this one is a $200 violation, and simply just know that it cannot be based on any certain conditions that you have. When you're entering a listing, you can choose whether the commission amount is a percentage based on the sale, or if it's like a whole dollar amount. But just note that, it can't be based on any certain conditions.
Hey, Natalie, forgive me for interrupting. The chat is not working. So there is it's okay. There's a reaction. People can do a reaction and they can actually raise their hand through there.
Oh, so great.
We can kind of, look at those. I'm sorry. I don't know why it's not working. I just checked it. It's turned on. So if anybody has a question, just raise your hand there and we will jump in at some point and address those questions. Okay.
Yeah, that would be great.
I was waiting till break, Natalie. I'm like, there's no chat happening here. So I'll take some notes and put it in an email as well, different blogs that might be helpful, or question and answers. So go ahead and continue, Natalie.
Yeah, we'll definitely send you a follow-up. If you do have a question, yeah, absolutely raise your hand, or even just unmute yourself. I'm totally okay with that. But like we said, we do have some time at the end for questions as well. Well, actually, before I keep on going, does anybody have any questions for me now?
I have a question.
Sure, absolutely, Kathleen.
Is this going to be recorded? I have to leave in at 11.
I understand that it will be recorded, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, great.
I have a question also, Natalie. Yeah. On a lot of, I guess like Open Door or something, they will give you an additional bonus.
Okay.
If you close by a certain date. Is that okay, that wording?
That is definitely a question better directed toward our data integrity department. I don't want to give you any incorrect information. Mm-hmm. I think that, they might say, yeah, that's okay, but place it in the private remarks. I'm not quite sure. But yeah, definitely a better question for them to clarify for you. So the last thing, a couple last things that I want to mention about the rules are just some important deadlines. I know that the process for just putting it in the MLS is kind of the long haul of getting all the information in there initially, but it's just important to note that you can't forget about it. You have to update it throughout its lifetime. And so we do have some deadlines on those. You do have 2 calendar days to actually enter the listing into the MLS from the date that you and the seller decide on. You have 4 calendar days to add that front exterior photo to the listing. And no, that photo doesn't have to be the primary photo. It doesn't have to be the first one in the listing. It just has to be included somewhere within those first 4 days. You have 3 calendar days to change the listing to pending or UCB once that contract has been signed. And then you have 2 days to change the status to closed. However, this one is kind of irrelevant, I feel, because that last step, when you're changing your listing to pending or UCB, well, it asks you for that close of escrow date. So as long as nothing has changed within the contract, you don't really got to worry about it. The listing is going to automatically close. And then 2 days to remove that lockbox after closing. Now, I do want to point out that even if your listing expires or you happen to cancel the contract, you must remove that lockbox 2 days after it cancels or expires as well. Make sure that you get that $100 of your lockbox back in your garage. So I do want to also explain how data integrity kind of categorizes these violations. They're obviously not all held in the same regard. As I kind of mentioned, lockbox violations are a little heavier weighing than the others. So I just want to mention how they categorize these. So you have non-penalty. My kind of best way to explain this one is that they're kind of factual data errors. There are things that data integrity can go and do their investigation work on. They can find the correct information, then they'll update it in your listing and notify you of that change. There isn't any monetary fine related to it, but the penalty violations, those ones do have a fine. And these ones are ones that can't be corrected, or even if they have been corrected, they may have caused some degree of irreversible damage. So just keep those in mind. But I also love that on ARMLS.com, we have a penalty policy. So you can kind of see what the fine amounts range for each of these penalties. So you can really know, okay, I'm definitely going to make sure I do this process correctly. And then lastly, the lockbox key violations. Like I said, these are heavier violations, and they're categorized into two different sections. You have minor lockbox violations, which is basically if there's a lockbox on a property that's not supposed to be there, data integrity will give you a time frame to remove that box from the property. If you remove it, fantastic. If you don't, that's where it could lead into a penalty. Now, the automatic lockbox and key violations are called automatic because if data integrity confirms that you violated one of these rules, you will receive a $500 violation automatically. So the best way to avoid this one is don't share your phone, don't give out your e-key or the PIN code to anybody else. And if you're going to somebody else's property, always make sure that you follow any showing instructions on the listing before you open the lockbox. Last rule I want to mention, just keep your contact information up to date. If you change your phone number, email address, it all goes through the association and then they filter it down through us. Lastly, just where to find the rules. I'm sure you all know ARMLS.com. Highlighted are my three favorite ones. Of course, the rules and regulations, inappropriate language to help kind of determine what I can and cannot say in my listing, and then that penalty policy so that I know to avoid those $500 violations because I definitely don't want to be doing any of that. So bringing it back to ARMLS.com, before we just jump right into FlexMLS and kind of start getting into adding a listing, there's some things that you probably want to do before you start that process. One being probably creating a CMA or doing comps for your client. It's not anything that I'm going to be going over today. I'm not going to demonstrate a CMA, but I do want to give you some options as far as resources. I feel like the broker is always the best place. They might have some programs or products that they have access to that they can provide. Otherwise, they might have a certain way that they suggest to pull those comparable properties. I also want to show you that on ARMLS.com, under that learning area, we have an online class on CMAs and FlexMLS. It does go over all three types of the CMAs, so you can kind of get familiar with all that's provided in FlexMLS. But Monsoon also provides a comp option. In my opinion, I think that one's the easiest, fastest way to get things done. But the FlexMLS one has a lot more features that you have access to. It can get sticky, though. I do want to mention that ARMLS staff cannot provide any guidance or suggestions on how to pull comps or what adjustments to make. It's really just how to use the software. So best place on how to use the software is probably one of these two classes. If you have suggestions on, what do I price this adjustment at or et cetera, the broker is going to be the best place for those suggestions. Now, the next thing that I want to point out is forms. You're going to need to get those contracts signed before you enter the listing into Flex. Most of your forms come from the broker again, or transaction desk. We do have a limited amount of forms on ARMLS.com. I like to always just get it from this homepage here, but you can find them under the MLS area. I say it's just a limited amount of forms because these are just the ones really related to the listing and ARMLS data. So you have your ER, your EA, and then your profile sheet, also known as the input form. I know that input form and profile sheet are kind of interchangeable terms there. And these are just the blank forms. So you can definitely get them transaction desk or elsewhere, but here's another place that you can use as a resource. So finally jumping into FlexMLS, we're going to get into the goodies. So I want to just start at my homepage, just as another day. Let's say I have a contract with a seller and they're wanting me to get their listing in today. Sure, let's just say they're super ambitious. They're ready right now. So I want to show you a couple of things with that. So under the menu, under the add change section, yes, absolutely. We can start from this add listing button, which will start a listing completely from scratch. Now, I want to start this way, but I'm going to show you a different way in a minute. So my page is going to look slightly different than yours, and I'm not going to go over every single, field and option that there is, but I do want to point out a couple of those key nuances. The property type, I'm sure that you know what property type you're listing when you come in here, but just keep in mind that if at any point you started your listing typing in information and then you're like, oh, shoot, they actually said they wanted this as a rental, just keep in mind if you change this section, it adjusts everything in the entire listing. So you will basically have to be starting from scratch. So there's a reason why it's the very first option that they provide to you. Just make sure that that's selected right from the get-go. Now, I do want to jump it over into the address tab and point out one of my absolute favorite features in the adding a listing section, which is, I see that there's a whole bunch of these red fields. Those are obviously the ones that are required. I have to have something within there. So let's just say I have my property here, 8149 East Mitchell Drive. Not required. I'm going to skip it. Not required. I'm going to skip it. Now, this one is in Scottsdale. And the zip code 251. Zip 4, let's just say I don't know it off the top of my head. I'm going to skip it for now. County code, this one's in Maricopa. Now you have the assessor's book number, the map number, the parcel number. This is, that parcel number, but really broken up. Well, shoot, I don't know that off the top of my head, right? I would have to go looking for that information. But there is this lovely button that Flex provides called Populate Tax Data. Clicking this, it will talk to Monsoon. It's going to pull the most recent tax information for this property and enter it into my listing. And I love that you'll see it didn't just, plug in my parcel number and my map number and book number, but if I go into my main field, it also plugged in my subdivision, my taxes, my owner name, all that information. And besides that, just saving me time, that saves me potential errors. I could have put in a crazy typo in my subdivision, and by clicking that button, that pulled it directly from the tax information, what they have on file. So perfect, beautiful. So I do want to switch gears a little bit because process going forward is all the same. From here going on, we're just typing in information, adding details about the listing. So I want to switch gears and show you the copy feature. Right now we're adding a listing totally from scratch, and that's a lot of time to be adding into your day. So let's bring it back to the home page, and let's say that maybe I know that this property's been listed in Flex before. Well, I'm just going to enter the address at the top search bar here and see what I find. Now, FlexMLS started keeping data in the year about 2000. And listings are never deleted. So if a listing has been added in ARMLS since then, you're going to be able to find it. Now, a couple of reasons why it wouldn't be, not every transaction goes through the MLS. It might have been a for sale by owner or an inheritance that can be found in Monsoon. But if you have a MLS number, that can give you a lot of information to save you time. So I do have a couple of results here, and MLS numbers just increase chronologically as time goes. So I see that this is the most recent one. I can definitely just get some data from here, use it as a resource, copy and paste some information, but Flex makes this easy on me. All that I need is an MLS number. So at the top here, I'm just gonna copy this guy. And now when I go into my main menu, not gonna start at adding a listing. That is starting completely from scratch. I wanna jump down to this copy feature. Now I will point out there is a full copy option it's really not used very often, especially because you can only use it if you were the previous listing agent and you still have to be within that same office. So it's kind of good for those scenarios of if you have a client that has high days on market and they want to reset it. It's a good way to have that listing off the market for the time period, and then once you're ready to relist, full copy, and that saves you so much time. But for this instance, I wasn't that previous listing agent. This is from a 2017, who knows whose listing it was, but it just asked, hey, what MLS number do you want to copy? Paste it in there. Now, it wasn't my listing. I don't have permission to use those photos. I'm going to add my own. So of course I have to unselect that. The property type, keeping it at residential, that's perfect for me. So now you'll see that I just started with an MLS number. That's all that FlexMLS asked me for. And now when I go to the address, that's basically all filled out for me. If I go to the main fields, oh, of course it needs the location. Sure, yes, that's the area. So besides just, the location and tax information, it now has my bedrooms, my bathrooms. Even when I go into this detail tab, it has all of my check boxes for, double sinks in the master bedroom. So that's a huge time saver that I didn't have to go through checking all those boxes. Now, of course, review the information. It's definitely important that you do your due diligence and review it, especially because, this is your client's most important piece of asset. You want to make sure you're representing it to the best of its ability. But another thing that I want to point out is that if you started by that copy feature, hey, lovely. I see that it filled out a lot of this information for me, but how come when we started it before, there were the taxes in there for me and I didn't have to do that? Well, I pulled this from a 2017 listing. I don't want it to pull the 2017 taxes and the 2017 owner in here. So now do I have to look for that information manually? Nope. All I got to do is just revisit that address tab, click populate tax data, and that's just a me thing. Those are my pop-ups. But that's going to pull the most recent tax information. So if you really think about it, if there was a listing or a property that you're listing that's already been an MLS, you can just start with the MLS number, copy it, click this populate tax data button, and you got most of your listing filled out for you. It's kind of a review process at that point. So now I'm going to go ahead and move along with the information. Like I said, definitely not going to go over every single field, just a couple of key nuances. But if you do have questions, raise your hand or just unmute yourself, whatever works for you is comfortable. So I'm just going to start kind of at the top here, moving my way down. I want to point out the status option. Sure, you definitely can start your listing as active. You might want to start it as coming soon if it's not quite ready yet, but I highly recommend that you check out this. It's a blog post on the limitations and rules regarding coming soon. Basically just some limitations like it can only be in coming soon for up to 30 days. And information like it doesn't go out to those syndicator websites. It only stays within FlexMLS. So just good to know like rules and limitations for that status if you are choosing coming soon. I want to point out that this is where you can indicate your compensation. Subagents and buyer broker are the two for the compensation. subagents really isn't used in Arizona. So that's basically always a no. But your buyer broker is where you can either say, I don't know, maybe my seller's really generous and they say, I'm going to give 11%. Or they come out here and say, you know, $6,000 for this sale. I just want you to pay attention that those two fields match up. You know, you don't want to go around saying, oh, I'm going to give 6,000% of a sale or something crazy like that. Just make sure that those match. Another one that I want to point out is this variable commission one. This one is really not very common. We do have a blog post if you want to know more about it. But this is more so if you're selling your own property, it's kind of just disclosure to say, hey, when the property sells, am I going to take commission on my own property? Maybe, maybe not. So this information got filled out for you just from clicking that populate tax data button.
Hey, Natalie, I have I want you to go back up a little bit.
Sure.
So where it says other compensation, you mentioned earlier they can't list that in the listing. If they were going to give a bonus, they could put it there though, correct?
I would assume so, but again, that's a better question for data integrity. I want to say, but Wendy, if that's, you know, a topic that we can ask and then send it in the follow-up email, that's definitely something we can do.
And then the other thing, this was something I learned, and I mean, I think I know the system pretty good, but if you go up to the top, I guess it would be my right, probably your left, show all fields. Like if I didn't want to show all the stuff that I don't have to and only show the required fields, that saves me time because sometimes I'm skipping through them, but there's a bunch of them. So anyway, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love it too, because maybe you've spent your hours on this listing and you're like, okay, I think I'm ready. And then you click the add button, it says, hey, you got an error. And it's like, oh, does that mean I have to go through all 4 of those pages? Like, nope. Show you an easy trick. Show the empty required fields. And it just narrows it down. It says, boom, hey, these are the ones that you have to do before you can add the listing. So yeah, love that trick. So keeping on going down, I do want to point out the owner name. Now this does populate from Monsoon from clicking that populate tax data button. But if you click on this little question bubble, you know, sometimes the owner, they don't want their name to be disclosed in the system, and that's okay. You don't have to disclose that information. You can simply say client of, you know, whatever your office is, and that's totally acceptable. So I could come in here and say, you know, client of ARMLS so that it would suffice.
Can I say something about that?
Sure.
Now, when populating to the transaction desk, then that kind of messes up, you know, for
I could definitely see that. Yeah, I'm not very versed in transaction desk, but I could definitely see how it would probably add client of ARMLS to all of your contracts.
So much easier if the because we can always get the name off of the tax records, but it's just that extra step. So that's
a great point that, you know, living in this bubble of the MLS world. Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely. Okay, great. So another thing that I wanted to point out is your approximate square foot. I think this is kind of a goofy topic. So you'll see that, it populated it from Monsoon. It pulled in the most recent, you know, accurate information from what the taxes have. But what if, I don't know, my owner is throwing a fit, they have a multi-million-dollar property and they say, no, this is not 1767 square feet. I had it appraised last week and they said it is 1772 square feet. Okay, well, if they're throwing a fit about it, let's say 1772. Well, you know, obviously that's not factual and accurate information. But if you say that the source of where you got that information was the appraiser, then that's accurate and factual information. You know, the source of the square footage doesn't always have to be the county assessor, but just keep in mind that they do have to be related. They have to be accurate and match up in order for it to be factual data. So I want to also bring it down to the lot square footage, very similar idea where if they're coming at you and say, no, that's not the lot square footage, you can say, okay, well, the owner says otherwise, they say it's this. And then, if there's a discrepancy dispute, hey, owner person. So now I want to go down to the remarks. Now, these ones, we kind of touched on them talking about the rules, but I want to mention that these, they're not required, especially with the cross streets and directions. You can easily skip over them. But I love putting in the idea of more is merrier when you're adding a listing. If you've ever taken like a searching class, you'll definitely hear the opposite, is that less is more, because if your client says, hey, I'm interested in a property in Phoenix, here is my budget, they're going to have a lot of different options. But if they come at you and say, I want to live in this subdivision with a fireplace in the master, and it has to have double sinks, and it has to have a kitchen island, X, Y, and Z, maybe one or two listings. So less is more when you're searching, but more the merrier here. I'm going to touch on it in a couple places. So more the merrier, because I could skip over this because everybody has Google Maps and their iPhone to just GPS things very easily. But if someone's looking at my listing in the MLS or in their portal, and they can easily visualize, oh, this property is on Hayden and Osborne, that just saves them from having to pull up their phone, typing in the address and doing all that. They can easily distinguish where the property is. Same thing with the directions. Yeah, they're going to pull up Google Maps for the direction, but maybe there's it's in a community where one direction versus another way is more scenic versus the other. And you kind of want to direct them in that more scenic way to visit the property. That's maybe another option for you. So going down to public remarks, with this one, I just love that they have the inappropriate language policy right here. So like I mentioned with public remarks, it's kind of best rule of thumb just to stick to describing the property itself. Do I want to say that this is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, except no, that information's already in there. I definitely want to get more creative, put my sales hat and my selling shoes on and see how I can get creative with this. But I don't want to stick to the terms of the sale or the transaction. Those are more kind of touchy subjects that would be for the private remarks, or definitely want to verify with data integrity if it can go public. And then you have your semi-private remarks, which I think are a pretty neat feature. They're private remarks, meaning they're held, they're not shown for any client out there, but it's information that maybe could be shared with a client if wanted. I like to think of this area as something that you probably don't want to market out to the world and say, appliances come as is or something crazy like that. But maybe something that, the buyer would want to know if it comes down to it. Maybe something with the RO, or who knows. And then your office remarks. Now, I can't say I've literally ever seen these being used. Only visible to those in your office. Maybe if you have someone that's really, office exclusive or who knows what. But those are just remarks for people visible in your office. If you find a really good use for it, send me an email. I'm really curious. Now, I want to jump over to the detail tab, which is the huge portion of this task. You have the massive scroll bar to the right-hand side. So like I said, definitely not going to go over every feature. If you have a question, let me know, but I'm just going to go over those nuances. And one of those being just the fact of, hey, I copied this listing from a 2017 listing. It's going to have all those checkboxes. I need to review the information. Like a good example is the first one here, special listing conditions. It looks like the previous owner was selling their own property. Definitely not the case here. I want to make sure that I review and update that information needed. Going down, like I said, there's just a couple of instances I want to point out for you. Here's one, is the separate den or office. This comes into play with your bedrooms plus, which some agents don't really know about, and they look at it all day long, and I'll show you an example of it. So separate dinner office, yes or no, this is a required field. You need some kind of a selection. And you'll see it says not a bedroom. Selecting this item will increase the bedrooms plus field by 1. So if you don't know what the bedrooms plus field is, I love to just take a moment and touch on that. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull up like a saved search I had with, some properties already ready for you. So let's just take this property in Phoenix, for example. I know it's kind of in small font on the Zoom call, but this shows 3 beds, 3 baths. But then right below it, bedrooms plus is 4. So does that mean that this property has 7 potential bedrooms in it? No, that's not what this is indicating. It means that there are 3 actual bedrooms, as you see, the 3 bed, 3 bath. But there's an additional room in the house that could potentially be used as a bedroom, depending on how the buyer wants to see it. And that, if we want to be nosy here, under other rooms, they have a bonus or game room. So that could potentially be used as a 4th bedroom, depending on, how the buyer wants to see it. So kind of interesting there. So that's where that kind of comes into play. So if you have a 4-bedroom property and it has a separate dinner office, it's going to show 5 under the bedrooms plus. Now let's also say that that property has a loft. You'll see that that is going to make the bedrooms plus field 6 at that point. So it will show 4 bedrooms and 6 bedrooms plus. Now you'll see there are only a couple of items that will uptick that bedrooms plus field by 1. But that's just where that comes into play. And I think it's kind of nice that FlexMLS gives the option for the buyer to kind of choose 3 or 4 or 6 bedrooms. Now, this is where I definitely want to touch on more the merrier. So I'm going to come down to my not my plumbing or heating or anything like that, property description. This is a good example. So you'll see the property description, this entire section, it's gray, it's not required. I can easily skip over this field because it's optional. However, if I did that, there are buyers out there that could potentially be looking for, mountain views or properties that have, north, south, east, or west exposure. Some buyers are really particular on what they're looking for. And if I didn't select that in my listing, well, even if my property does have mountain views or X, Y, and Z, my listing isn't going to come up for those buyers. So that's why I say more the merrier. Take your time. I know it's a big process. I feel like it's the iceberg effect where at the top, everyone's like, oh, what a nice listing and photos that you have. Let me put an offer on it. But what they don't see is, underneath of getting all those contracts signed and getting photos done and adding literally every piece of detail into the MLS, like it's a huge process. So take your time. Like I said, you really just want to represent the property to the best of its ability. This is your client's biggest asset in life, typically. So another item that I want to touch on is just at the very, very bottom here. I know this is a humongous page. The very bottom, contract information or contact information, I should say. My page looks a little bit different than yours because I'm staff, but for you, it's going to automatically pull in, your phone number, the office phone number, a co-lister phone number if you did have one. But just keep in mind that you can change this per listing. Maybe you're going on vacation or maybe this is a rental property and you prefer to have all of those phone calls directed elsewhere. You can change these phone numbers per the listing and then, change it back if need be. So those are really the options that I wanted to show you in adding a listing. I love that Michelle pointed out this show all fields or the required fields, empty required fields. You'll see that on this massive detail page, changing this to just empty required, look at that. I have just those 3 fields, easily pinpointed that for me. So I want to, of course, point out that you can save your incomplete listing. Like I mentioned, it's a process. You know, take your time with it. Save it if you need to come back to it later. I'm obviously not going to add a listing for, you know, obvious purposes, just to not put anything on the market. But I want to bring up a listing that is on the market and show you a couple of things when you're changing it. So let me pull up a previous MLS number that I have here. And I want to see, oh, of course, this Zoom chat is in my way. Okay, so I want to pull up an MLS number and show you a couple things on this change page. So, you know, this is a page that I feel like we're pretty familiar with to change any of the details of the listing. But I want to point out these couple of options at the top here. So you do have your input form, and I love to point out that this is available as an incomplete as well. So if your listing is still an incomplete, you have the option to print or email it, and you can generate your input form. So that way you're not doubling up on your work. You're not having to enter the information in MLS and then enter all the information in the form here. I know that sounds like you all like to work in transaction desk. I know that you can import the information into there, but this is just a quick way if you do need that input form or the profile sheet filled out for you. So you can print this and it has your owner's signature lines at the very bottom here. Another thing at the very top of this is the activity report. The activity report is a way for you to see how many people have viewed your property, how many are liking it, or if there are similar properties related to it. I'll kind of make this a little bit bigger. So you can see that you can filter by a certain date range. Maybe you want to go back from, you know, the time that it was listed. Maybe you want to gauge if it's had any new activity from like a price change that you did recently. But you can definitely view this information to see how much engagement that your listing really is getting. You can also set up auto emails. So maybe you want to send this out to your seller once a week. You can definitely do that just to have them, you know, also gauge how well the listing is doing. Maybe they need to, you know, change the price. Maybe they need to do something with their listing to get that more engagement. So I definitely like this report. We do have a blog post if you want to know more about what these different categories mean, kind of just taken from different places all throughout FlexMLS, and compiles it to see, you know, just how your listing is doing.
Hey, Natalie, a couple of things on this. If you can scroll down a little bit.
Yeah.
Right there where it says people who viewed this listing also saved. If you,
yes.
You know, that's kind of nice. People who viewed this listing also viewed. If you're in there fiddling and looking at your listings all the time, your listings are going to show up there. So just know that.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Yeah.
So, you know, which is fine. You can explain that to your clients. But this is, if you're trying to get a price drop with somebody and you can see that they're looking at your $1 million listing and then they're looking at similar listings in the 800 range, you can kind of really show that to your clients. We use this report a lot. And you can actually, if you go up to the top, you can set it to go out to your people automatically. Yeah, with the auto emails, which is a nice feature. You can just add your clients there and then you can CC yourself, of course, and then you can show them what's going on. They'll start to see it themselves.
Yeah, great. Absolutely. So that's really all that I had for you. Actually, there is one more thing I just wanted to touch on, just because I feel like this is a little known feature in FlexMLS. But I also feel like many agents don't know about it. And the more that do know about it, I feel like the better it works. I'm wondering how many are familiar with that reverse prospecting process, or if that really works for you. I'm just curious to see Michelle shaking her head because I've always been curious. It seems like it's a really great way to
I use it.
target those people that are interested.
Absolutely. I send, if I have any price changes or anything, new listing and price changes, I always send, so it's not like it's intrusive. You're just providing the information. And I actually, instead of doing an email to everybody, I go in individually and send them. So it's doesn't come through as a spam.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's a great tip.
I think
I would.
the reason I'm shaking my head is because we use the Flex IDX. So leads come in through my website, and I have like 1,200 people in there. And then it just gets to be too much. Is what I found. So I turned it off.
Yeah, I know that that FlexML, the IDX, can definitely give you a lot. I hear it's a little bit expensive, but it's very beneficial if you're going to use it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Glenn, if you're getting some use out of it, I'd love to just touch on it for a second. So basically, I mean, I don't have any listings. Let me see if I can kind of go into an example here. But basically, if you do have a listing that's on the market, maybe it's not getting any bites recently, and you are like, what the heck? This seems like it's in a good price range. There's beautiful photos up. What the heck is going on? If you go into the main menu, there is this option for reverse prospecting. So basically, if you have a listing on the market, it asks you which, you're actually going to have a couple of checkboxes here. It's not just going to pre-arrange you on listings. But I guess because I'm staff here, I get those special permissions. But if I have an MLS number that I want to kind of be nosy on and kind of see who I can target, this is a progress bar. I will say that this is one of the longest loading things in FlexMLS, because what this is doing is that it's going through literally every single agent in the system and every single one of their contacts. And it's seeing if this property happens to be in one of their searches. So I have a small list here because it's a test listing. But basically, this is telling me that Rena at Classified Realty, they're working with a buyer that has a search set up with probably, a portal and a subscription. And my listing falls into that play. So I could reach out to Rena and Laura and all these people on my list and say, hey, I think you have a buyer that might be really interested in my property. And that's just a really easy way to target and pinpoint another agent and get that connection and collaboration going for a sale. So just a potential out there. I think it's just a nice thing to know about if you're kind of stuck in a between a rock and a hard place. Great blog to view on it, but yeah, definitely some good information there. I loved your guys' time today. I'm sad that you don't have any more questions for me, so I would love to open it up for any questions that you might have. And even if it's not relating to, this adding a listing process, hit me with whatever you got.
Okay, I'm going to jump in if nobody
Sure.
else. So the next time we have you come, we want to, take it a little bit more advanced, like go in. Some things I've learned recently is, how to find county islands and doing the flood overlays.
Ooh,
and things like that. If nobody has questions today, I would love to hear some of the things that you would like to see in our next training, and then we can take it up a notch.
I actually have a quick question.
Sure.
So I'm wondering, when you put a new listing in, so you save it incomplete, and I'm waiting for my professional photos to come back.
Yes.
So what is the situation on the photos? Because I've heard that, like, I can't remember the number. I'm going to say the first 6 to 8 go to the syndicated sites. So I have always made a practice of rearranging those, but sometimes with that coming soon feature, I was just wondering, like, because that doesn't go to the syndicated sites, so we're okay without redoing that, correct? Did I say that right?
Correct. Basically, if you wanted to have like your photos reordered for those syndication sites, you would just want to make sure that you do it before it actually goes active.
Okay.
Yeah, great question.
Can I piggyback on that?
Sure.
So the reason they say the first 5 or 6 photos, a lot of the syndication sites now, like, Zillow's a brokerage now, but realtor.com and some of the other syndication sites, the big ones, they'll take all your photos. But if you use something like List Hub, it goes out to, I think it's roughly 68 places the first day. And then after 72 hours, it just goes out everywhere. And there's like over 1,000 websites. Some of them only pull in 5 photos. So you want to make sure you're using those 5 photos in a way that if you put 5 photos of the front of the house, you're not going to get a whole lot of bang for your buck. So what we do is we do like the front, the backyard, the master, the kitchen. We do some of so that if they looked at those 5 photos, they're getting a good overview of that home. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, no, I love that information. Those things that you really don't think about is that, yeah, there are those other websites that have restrictions and limitations, and sometimes they only pull a couple of photos. So yeah, get the most impact out of those first couple of photos that you got. Lynn, I see that you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So when I set up searches for clients, and if you add yourself to be to receive that email response when they're sent, if you want to, because there's so many listings now, I've got a couple. Is there a way to go back in there and remove yourself from there, or do you have to start the search over?
Ooh, I love this one because I can tell you that when I started to play around, I was like, oh yeah, I want to copy myself on everything. And then it just became so much.
Too much. Mm-hmm.
So yes, there is a way to do that. Let me kind of go back into my account here. If I go into the main menu, now I know that kind of anything related to, your clients and the email communication, we always jump right into contact management, but there's a lot of other cool features in here. Like I know the My Sent email page is seldomly used, but I think it's a really nice tool that you have access to. But you do have this subscriptions area. This is kind of like a bulk management of those automatic emails. I only have 2, so that's a terrible example for bulk management. But you can see here that besides just me, clicking these boxes and like deleting it, I could remove just my agent notification. So
Yay, thank you.
that should save your inbox hundreds of emails.
Yes, it did. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great question. And I love that. Yeah, Michelle, like if you're more interested in like an advanced thing like county, island, those, I know that there are so many like weird kind of tricky fields because they're called dumb things in the MLS and you have to really find them. So yeah, that's definitely a good one. Like I know condos are always a real hot topic in that sense. But yeah, that's definitely a great suggestion if you want to throw out things that you're interested in if you don't have questions.
Kelly, do you have some suggestions?
Tips like that, what we just did with the subscription, things that are not readily known. I have learned several things today. But doing that, the portal is another huge one that people are lacking in knowledge on how what the difference between the subscription is and the portal. And, do I do both? If there's is there better than one or the other, or is it, I always set everybody up with both.
Yeah, right.
So they won't miss it. But little tips like this, templates are really good. That's another one that,
templates, yes,
that is well not used as much as could be to do things. So yeah, those tips that we don't have on an everyday basis kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, love the templates one. That's a big time saver.
The other thing, how we use our listing collections, that's my number one thing that I touch. I use that all the time. every time I do comps, I put comps hyphen and the address. So I can always jump back in at any time if an agent asks me, you know, what are your comps on this property? I have all of them saved from, and we show that on the listing appointment. And then our listing collections, we put our buyer showing in there too. So I can tell you exactly how many homes I've shown that buyer, what they've seen. If they want to go back to one, I just click listing collections and it's there under their name. It's easy. So, you know, things like that, I think would help agents. It's kind of a workaround that we've created. I think CMAs, digging into that a little bit deeper. We do CMAs all the time, but I don't always use the CMA tool within Flex.
And I would say that, I mean, like I mentioned, you know, we can't provide advice or suggestions, but like I would be more than happy to walk you through CMAs in Monsoon and in Flex, just to, because I know there's a lot in there. But you know, if you're not opposed to me just saying, oh gosh, I have to put my hands up here and just say, ask your broker, then I would be more than happy to do that.
Yeah. What else, you guys? What else do you want to see? What is that burning question that keeps you up at night and waste time when you get in here and you don't know how to do it?
And I would also, oh, go ahead.
No, go, sorry.
I would also just love to point out, back on ARMLS.com, I'm just going to kind of go back to the homepage here. I like under this MLS tab, you know, this is kind of just general information. How do I join my logins? But there is this MLS roadmap, and this kind of just helps you see what's happening, what's new at ARMLS from either upcoming or previous dates. So you can kind of see, you know, with that ultimate new homes and this FlexMLS remodel, how, you know, Flex is modernizing and prettifying all these pages. So you can kind of just get an idea of really what's going on and you're not surprised by anything. So wanted to point this out, but yeah, what question do you have, Kelly?
Yeah, Kelly.
I would also say helping agents do stats, getting the market stats out of there, whether it be the zip code or the county or whatever, that would also be great help for them to be able to
that one.
Quick way of doing it versus the manual. Again.
I'm also curious with that topic, do you normally like go to the page in FlexMLS where you have to pull like the reports for all the statistics? Okay. I'll show you another way next time.
Yeah,
I've been using the market summary, but I don't know if that gives me all the correct, accurate details.
That's a good one. You know, I mean, there's a couple dozen places in Flex where you can pull statistical information, and you know, they all kind of provide different bits and pieces of information, but I found that there are two main areas where you can kind of get everything that you and, you know, a client might be looking for. So definitely something I can put on for next time. Yeah, and then Michelle, what did you have?
You know, definitely encourage people to go to the Ultimate New Homes. We just added it. So it's a brand new feature. It's one, I mean, we used to have it years ago. We brought it back. It's the best new home search. The other home search that we had, I think it was R.L. Brown. I found that when I would put information in there, next thing I knew, they were kind of emailing my clients, and I don't know what that was about. And that was one of the things we did not want to happen. So we brought back the new Ultimate New Home Search. So if you guys aren't aware of that, go in there and poke around, because new home sales, I mean, commissions are much higher. They're giving your clients all kinds of incentives to get into those. So definitely don't forget about that.
It's a very user-friendly product too, in my opinion,
yes,
compared to those other, you know, crazy builder websites.
And you can upgrade and put it on your website so people can search for new homes right from your website. So there's all kinds of things available in there. Any final questions? I know it might take some of you a minute or so to unmute yourself, but we'd love to hear from you. If there's any other things you want to ask about today or something you want to see in the future, we can bring Natalie and Wendy back to help us. I'm sorry about the chat feature, but I'll get that fixed.
No worries.
For next time, so it'll be a little bit easier. But yeah, any other questions before we let Natalie go?
Hey, Michelle, are we thinking that we might do this bi-weekly or have a set time so that we all catch it and come in versus last minute kind
Are
of thing.
you volunteering to help me organize it? Because I'm a little bit full and I'm trying to, do my best to support agents out there and help them. We threw it together at the last minute, primarily because we had the happy hour last night. And we were reminding everybody, and agent, we still had 29 agents. So I think that's pretty good. A pretty good turnout on it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I can help. Just let me know. But the reason I was wondering is because I almost missed it. My guys and all of us almost missed it because we didn't see it until this morning. So I just didn't know if you were going to want the idea of setting something up like, so everybody can say, oh, this Monday or this whatever, we're going to catch an hour with Natalie and catch the tools, the latest and greatest. So that's why I was asking.
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly, Natalie, we haven't discussed that, but that's something we can discuss. But there's a ton of stuff in Flex to dig into. And sometimes I find things by mistake and I'm like, ooh, what's this?
Right.
And so some of those things, I know some of the things today you probably knew as agents, entering listings and stuff, that's, something we do all day, but I love digging into the things that we're not that used to using, because I think there's value in some of those to help us.
Yeah, and I feel like especially with, a group that's had some time and experience and kind of really has time to digest a lot of the main features in FlexMLS, I think we can definitely dive a little deeper into those not so often used items or features. Absolutely. And I will definitely point out that I will be sending everybody a follow-up email. I think that Wendy got everybody's name, so I definitely want to send a follow-up email just so you have my information and that I can, send you some blog posts and a survey. We always love to hear from you and see how you think that we're doing over at ARMLS and see if there's any improvements or suggestions that you might have for us.
That's great. Thank you to both Wendy and Natalie for your time and your energy. And thank you to all of you guys, for taking time out of your day to be here to learn and be better in our industry. I mean, that's what we all need, right? Just we improve our industry. So with that, we'll see you next time, Natalie. I'll get with you and we'll get some time scheduled. And thank you everyone for attending.
Great to be here.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Michelle,
everybody.
For organizing
Thanks,
this.
Michelle. Thanks, Natalie.
Welcome. Bye, guys.